Hi, welcome to Mikey's Video Game Madness. Today we're playing Alice, The Madness Returns. This is the sequel to American McGee's Alice, which is sort of the spiritual sequel. Lewis Carroll obviously didn't make this. He was long dead, or he may even made the first game. He was long dead, like when they made this series or whatever. But American McGee's Alice was basically a sequel to Lewis Carroll's Beyond the Looking Glass, which was the sequel to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which a lot of people know as Alice in Wonderland, you know, like the Disney version and the many made-for-TV movies. Did anybody ever see that one made-for-TV movie that had like Sherman Hemsley and Sammy Davis Jr. that kind of blended together Alice in Wonderland and Beyond the Looking Glass? It was like a two-parter, had like commercials in it. My grandparents taped that, and the costumes are really crappy, but there's just this creepy vibe about it. I can't explain it. I mean, obviously the Jabberwock, even though it looked terrible if you go back and watch it now, scared the crap out of me like when I was a little kid, but it looked like a Godzilla monster, and it just reminded me of a nightmare. Everything would start getting dark and it would start the lightning outside, and you know the Jabberwocky was coming. It was pretty crazy stuff. If you're a long-term viewer, you might notice that I already covered this game a long time ago, but I covered it a long time ago when I didn't have the technology to do this as well. Unfortunately, today's been a long day, so the commentary might actually be better on the old video than the new one. I don't know. But, yeah, I have recorded with AV cables and the worst microphone known to man, so I was able to use component cables this time and recorded at 720p, because you really can't record 1080p with component cables on the PlayStation 3. You kind of have to fake it. Like, if you get a recorder to record 7th gen and 8th gen systems that primarily use HDMI, like they'll usually come with an adapter that you have to hook up the component cables from the PlayStation 3 into the adapter that goes into a HDMI cable. I probably explained this a million times, but why not a million and one? But anyway, yeah, for whatever reason, I don't know if it has to do with a hardware lock, because they unlocked it on the PlayStation 4 hardware lock. I should be more specific. I don't know if it's a permanent thing or Sony's just being hard-headed about it, but PlayStation 3 doesn't let you record through HDMI. There's a lock, but there was originally a lock on the PlayStation 4, but there's an option to unlock it. The only thing it doesn't work with is like Netflix, or if you watch a video on YouTube or something like that, which is completely understandable because they don't want you recording your Blu-rays and stuff like that. But, you know, if they did that with a PlayStation 3, it would be great. But, you know, except for a few third-party titles, this is the last support that the 7th gen is really going to get. Not this game, but I mean, this era is probably the last time Sony is ever going to think about the PlayStation 3. It's definitely considered a legacy console now, and it's the same deal with Microsoft's Xbox 360. I think the sports titles will come for a while. I think the Xbox 360 will get less support just based on how Microsoft treated the original Xbox once the Xbox 360 came out, and now that the Xbox One's been out. I think the PlayStation 3 will get support throughout, because one benefit of the PlayStation 3 is it gets a lot of support overseas, and overseas they seem to be later adopters than people in the West as far as adopting a new console. So they usually still come out with last gen games for quite some time. A lot of times something that's exclusively like on the PlayStation 4 here, there'll be a PlayStation 3 version overseas. I'm actually surprised Persona 5, which I'm super stoked about. That's coming out next year. If you're not into JRPGs, you probably don't give a fuck, but I'm super excited about it. And they're actually releasing the PlayStation 3 version here, as well as the PlayStation 4. Obviously, I'll get the PlayStation 4 version, but it's nice that they're still getting support for the PlayStation 3. So I think the PlayStation 3, I'll get more third-party support beside like sports games and stuff like that, because that's usually the last thing that stops on an older console. But I think most of the third-party support that's not sports games on PlayStation 3 are going to be niche titles like Japanese games and stuff like that that you either despise or you love. I personally really enjoy them because they're obscure and they have like a different perspective and style and usually different mechanics than American games have. Like if you play a Japanese RPG versus a Western RPG, they're very different. And a lot of times, like if you played a Japanese first-person shooter, which there aren't many of because that's not a popular genre there, or a open-world game like Yakuza 5, which I'll eventually get to. Although my Yakuza videos haven't always been the most exciting because when you have a open-world Japanese game, they really don't know how to balance gameplay and story at the same time. So usually there's hours of story, and if it's the first time I played the game, I don't know where the gameplay is going to start. But of course it usually doesn't start till like 45 minutes in, and then I'm going to have to edit it out. So, but I recorded Yakuza 5, but there's not a whole lot of gameplay in it. Maybe I'll do another video at some other point. I haven't posted it as of this recording, but I did record it. It's a shame because there's a lot of cool stuff there. I almost bought Yakuza 4 and Yakuza 5, or was debating on it, but it's a digital only copy, and that was my hang up about it. And it really sucks. Sega's kind of being buttholes about Yakuza 5 because there's this company called Limited Run Games, and you might have seen them at the local game stores or GameStop or whatever. When you see like the smaller DLC titles like Octodad or what is it, Abe's Odyssey, Fresh and New and Tasty or whatever, some of the DLC titles, limited run games, I'll get the license for them and print out a limited run. So once they're gone, that's it, unless they've done really well, and then they might do a second run, and they actually number their games. But they offered to publish the game for Sega, and Sega still said no. They're being really stubborn. Ironically, it's been one of the best-selling downloadable only titles, but it's like 23 gigabytes. Come on, could you have given us a physical version? So for something that would normally take up 4 gigs with a physical disc, if that, I have to have 23 gigabytes reserved just for that game, probably for the console's life cycle if I want to play it. But PSN, that was one of their free PS Plus games this month, which is awesome, so I get to play it for free. Unfortunately, if the server goes down, hopefully they'll be nice and be like, oh, I'll keep it. But if not, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm sure by then they'll probably have something on the internet where you can download it or whatever. Even though there's an explicit warning, Sega being buttholes again. It's like, what are we supposed to do to back up our copies? If I knew a way to back up the copy without having to hack my system or something like that, I would have been more than happy to get a physical copy. Hell, I would have been more than happy to get an import copy if there was an English option. And the translation, the game itself is awesome from what I've played anyway, but the gameplay on it and the translation, it's still all very much in Japanese, which actually works quite well with that game, because I think if they added American voice actors for a game that's trying to be somewhat serious, sometimes American actors doing voices for Japanese content. Sometimes they're a little bit over the top versus the Japanese actors, and it just looks silly. I think since it's spoken in the native language, the delivery is a little bit better. I mean, there are good animes and games that have a good delivery based on a game that's originally Japanese. Again, I'm sorry if I sound out of it. I'm very tired today. Hasn't been the best day, and you might be wondering, well, why are you doing a video? Because I enjoy doing these videos. So if it's not as good as you wanted it to be, and it kind of sucks because this is the second time I'm doing Alice, so I was hoping this video would be really good, and maybe it will be after I'm done watching. I'll be like, oh, that's not so bad. But anyway, yeah, if you don't like this video, just watch another one of my videos, but make sure it's one of mine. Anyway, not that it matters, not that I'm making money, but I like it when I know that I'm making stuff that people enjoy. But yeah, I just really like this game, and even though this is the lesser version, it's not that bad. Like, usually if there's like a version of the game that's a lot better looking on the Xbox 360 than the PlayStation 3, then I'll get the Xbox 360 version, even if I own the PlayStation 3 version. An example would be the Ghostbusters port on the Xbox 360 and the Xbox 360 port of Bayonetta. Those are superior than the PlayStation 3 version, so I definitely picked those up. Even when I had the PlayStation 3 versions, like especially Bayonetta. I mean, Ghostbusters is lower resolution, and there's like one effect that's missing, which is the I'm sorry about the person popping up. Hello, Philip, if you're watching this. Anyway, yeah, the Ghostbusters has a missing glowing ember effect on the trails of your particle stream, like if you shoot at the wall or something, and it's in lower resolution. The textures are a lot higher on the Xbox 360, and overall looks nicer, which is ironic because Ghostbusters is actually owned by Sony. Oh well. Anyway, but Bayonetta, that's the worst. Platinum Games, which they never made the mistake again, and when they ended up porting their games after that to the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, the PlayStation 3 ended up being the lead platform, so when games like Vanquish and Metal Gear Solid Rising came out, Metal Gear Solid Rising and Vanquish were actually better on the PlayStation 3. And to let you know how bad of a port the Bayonetta was on the PlayStation 3, the loading times were super bad on the PlayStation 3 to the point where they had to patch it, and they were still really long. Like, the loading times were almost a minute or more long, which I guess we're old school gamers. That doesn't really sound like a big deal, especially if you're used to the days of the Commodore 64 and you're looking at that flashing rainbow loading screen. I know because I had a hand-me-down Commodore 64 that I got when I was in elementary school because I was really into computers, and around that time the Commodore 64s were pretty affordable because people were starting to get like Windows PCs and stuff like that. I'm sure people were starting to play Doom and stuff like that when I was playing Commodore 64 games, which I appreciate. I'm glad I got to experience something that maybe some people my age never got to experience, so that's good, I guess. Anyway, yeah, I lost my whole train of thought. Oh, go figure. But yeah, anyway, but the worst thing about Bayonetta, beside the graphics, also the colors are really desaturated in the PlayStation 3, and the textures aren't the greatest, and the resolution's lower. So you think with all these compromises it'd be able to run at a high frame rate, but no. The PS3 version of Bayonetta runs at 30 frames per second, while the Xbox 360 version runs at 60. Now, if that's not a gimped port, I don't know what is, and I can understand why Platinum Studios quickly went and made the PlayStation 3 the lead platform. It's partly Sony's fault because Sony made a very difficult system to program for The Xbox 360 basically has PC architecture and is a lot like programming for the PC. I'm not a programmer. This is just based on what I read, so I could basically be feeding you bullshit, and I apologize if I'm doing that. But anyway, the PlayStation 3 is technically more powerful than the PlayStation 3, and when they started getting console parity, you started getting PlayStation 3 multi-platform ports that were actually better than the Xbox 360. Games that tend to run on the Unreal Engine 3, usually even when they had mostly console parity, would always look slightly better on the Xbox 360, because when that engine was developed, it was developed with the PC and the Xbox 360 in mind. The PS3 really didn't come out yet. It was made to be downscaled and made to be put on multi-platforms, but with the cell architecture and how you have to divide everything up into individual processors and shit like that, and I'm talking very vaguely because I'm not a programmer, but that was difficult. But then when Naughty Dog got a hold of a game, or say Insomniac, or the PlayStation exclusives, or even some of the third-party Japanese games that only made their game for the PlayStation 3, they ended up looking a lot nicer than maybe you would see in the multi-platform game that would look out of place. Like some of the PlayStation 3 exclusives don't look as good as a PlayStation 4 game as far as a leap in generation, but it almost looks like it doesn't belong on that system. Like there is a mid-generation in between where half of the power, like the PlayStation 3 gained like 50% more power or whatever. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Hopefully it sounds good. But anyway, I really like this game. I really like the way that it explores mental illness and stuff like that. Basically, this is Alice trying to forget instead of dealing with her problems, and it's manifesting through Wonderland. And I can relate to that a lot. She's going to therapy and they're trying to dope her up, you know, hypnotize her, try to make her forget, even though the doctor sort of says you have to deal with it. The way he's making her deal with it is drugging her up and stuff like that. And the game switches between the real world and Wonderland, and you kind of see the parallels between each world. And basically, it's sort of giving you the message that no matter how terrible things are, you kind of have to face your demons. And I have issues with anxiety, and that's part of the reason why I suffer with anxiety today. I don't want that to be a label, and I try not to make it a label that defines me or use it as there's my excellent platforming skills at work right there. I like how it scatters and butterflies. It just looks really surreal whenever she dies. It makes her look sweet, even though she's like stabbing stuff and has blood all over her apron. It was kind of funny when she went into this outfit. She already had blood stains before she stabbed the first thing. But yeah, I really like how they explore the science of psychiatry and stuff like that during this time. And some of the stuff is somewhat similar, where they're just drugging her up and trying to make her forget. She's not dealing with her problems, and sometimes when you don't deal with them, as I started to say as I lost track of what I was saying, because she blew up into a flume of butterflies. Is it a flume? I don't know. I'm making up stuff here. But anyway, when you don't deal with stuff and bottle it up, it'll manifest later. Like, I wasn't going to say your body can only take so much. I guess your mind is a huge part of, I guess, your spiritual body or some shit like that. I don't know. I'm not trying to teach like a new age class or whatever. But yeah, your mind can only handle so much, and even though you forget, it's still there. You know, you have to deal with stuff, and that's one of the reasons why I have anxiety, because I try to be tough about it and bottle it up. You know, I'm an adult. I shouldn't let things bother me. I should just brush it off. And you know what? one day I started having panic attacks and shit like that because I didn't deal with stuff and I didn't even know it was happening, you know? It just shows up just like that. And I think this game really explores that, and I find that really interesting and fascinating. This game, gameplay-wise, isn't going to win you over in any way. It's typical platforming, hack and slash. It's all fun. There's puzzle solving. And really what's going to draw you to this game is the world. If the world doesn't appeal to you and the story doesn't appeal to you, this isn't going to appeal to you. If you don't care for like platformers, it's just not, unfortunately. And I really wanted to get a decent looking version of this game to show up the graphics, even though this is the lesser of the ports. This is very similar looking to the Xbox 360. I mean, you'd have to put the screen side by side and nitpick and be like, oh, there were some extra textures added there but not here. It's that sort of thing, but it's very similar. I also really like the effect of her clothing and her hair, how it animates depending on the direction she's going. It's a lot like or at least it looks like the Tress effects in the Tomb Raider games, or at least the definitive editions in the PC version on the Xbox One, PS4, and PC. The Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 version of Tomb Raider did not have those effects with Lara Croft, but this game has an effect that's similar to it, and I think it looks really cool, and it's the first time ever really saw it. I mean, it makes her hair look kind of nappy because the engine can only render so many strands of hair, but it still looks really nice. And I just love exploring like this creative world, and it really does change from area to area. This game gets more puzzle heavy the further you go. It's nothing you can't solve, it just takes time. I mean, you don't need to be a genius to figure out anything. It's not like trying to trick you or stump you where you're like stuck in one area for hours, but there is some backtracking and stuff that might turn off some people. But I really feel like the draw of this game is the art style, the atmosphere, the philosophy, the story, the characters, all that stuff. All the stuff that's not really gameplay related. But it's a solid game throughout. The game doesn't do anything wrong gameplay-wise. It's just like if you're not into platformers, your main draw is just going to be the atmosphere, the story, the characters, etc. Unlike in the story, she doesn't have to drink a bottle every single time to shrink down or grow large. You just have to hold the trigger button. I think it's R2, I believe that's what I held, the shrink. You have a machine gun pepper grinder that's like a minigun. That's pretty novel. As you go further into the game, it gets a little bit more dark and macabre and stuff like that. When this originally came out, it did come out with Alice the Madness Returns. If you got a used copy, I'm sure the voucher code has already been used. And if you got a new copy, I don't know if the voucher code is still valid. I believe you can still buy this, at least in the PlayStation Store. I don't have this for the Xbox 360, so I didn't see the option to buy it at the Xbox Live Arcade, but I assume if it's still on the PlayStation Network, it's probably still on the Xbox Live Arcade. I think that's like either $10 or $20, probably closer to 10. I can't see it still being $20. Or if it was free for a long time because it came with this game and then they sold it separately. And that's one of the reasons why I went back to rediscover this game, is because now that the 7th gen of consoles is ending, I want to make sure all the games that I downloaded that I actually can't get again are on my hard drive, so if they ever shut down the server, I have everything. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're interested, check out this game. Take care. Bye.
If you want to, like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.